back to Wtf Rc Cars. So today we've got another update for the Dragon Hammer V2, and we're going to see if we can swap these plastic diff holders out for some aluminium ones that are supplied for the Losi DBXL, and we're going to see how close they are to fit and see if we have to do any work machining wise to get them on there. So we need to get all this front end stripped down, and we're also going to be swapping out this little rubber boot here because that one's cracked. So first things first, we're going to get these two off the shockers, and that should let us lift them up separately and leave all this on the car. And I believe we're also going to take off, so once the shockers are up, we want these two off, one on either side, and then that'll let these shockers lift up out the way, and that should let us release the front brace. So it's going to be these two, and then these two, that one and that one, and then these two, and then we'll see what else we need to take off. So that's the ends of the shocks off. We've removed these two, so it's both the shock screws, these two screws, and I've just popped these back through. So you've got the olive in the middle, and the nut comes through from this side. Sorry, the bolt comes through from this side, and then just tighten the locking nut back on gently. And then the next thing we're going to want to do is remove these two from here, because we've got this bit loose. So now we need to remove the front mudguard. So it's going to be these two on the bottom. So we'll crack on with that. Once the front bumper's removed, and you can see we're down to this part. Now I'm going to take the sway bar off because it fastens to these two plates that we're going to be, these two mounts that we're going to be removing. So I'm going to take these 4 screws out, and I'm going to undo the little grub screw either side of the sway bar, and that'll let the sway bar plate and the sway bar come away. So we'll get that. So that's the sway bar removed, and we can also now get to replace this cracked boot, so we can get that one sorted. They usually come off quite easy. And I've just put the 4 little screws that hold the sway bar retaining plate back in, so we don't want to lose them. So the next thing we're going to do is these two and these two, and see if we can get the shock assembly off in one piece. So let's crack on with that one. Right, so that's these two out, these two. On the back of this there's like a little lug in place. So now I'm going to remove, let's have a look. So we want these two removed, so one off either side. And then we should be able to slide this out and get the arms completely off and away. And then these two at the bottom should come loose. Once you bring these two brackets forward, that should then let you remove the shock mount. So just quick recap, it's going to be one off either end of the steering links, and then these two out. This should come out, and that should let us remove the shock mount and both arms. So let's get that. So once you slide this forward, you can slide all the arms off in one piece. You then remove those two little lugs off the front of the diff towers, and then that lets the shock assembly come away. And then basically that's what you're left with. Now this will just slide out. It'll take a bit of doing, but you can just work it out. So you want to remove that, and then we should just be left with these diff towers fastened to the chassis. And then it will just be a few screws underneath. I think it's these two and then these two. Let's see if I can get a shot of them. And these and this are just lugs on the diff towers. So you can either try and pull this out now, or you can undo them screws and lift the whole thing out. You have got 2 more screws. Let's see if I can get them. 2 more screws on the top. So they'll need to come out. The 4 screws on the bottom of this, but you can just bring this diff carefully forward, and you can get it out the car as it is. So we'll get that removed. So that's the entire thing removed. You've got 2 screws either side of them and 2 screws at the front. Then if you just back these out, you can lift that up and you can lift the whole diff arm assembly up and out. And then on the back of it, you've got this fastened, and that sits that way round on the chassis. So you need to take both the diff arms or shock tower arms, whatever you want to call them. You need to take them off and then remove that from the back of it. And then we need to clean all this up because we need a nice flat surface to put it back on. Right, so these are the DBXL front diff tower hubs, if you like, or brackets, or shock tower arms, whatever you want to call them. The only difference is on these, they've got this little bit on the back, and I'm just wondering if that is going to interfere with the steering. Let's see if we can get one of these standard ones. So if you lay it on top of it, everything is pretty much identical as to how they fasten together, but I'm just wondering if that's going to be a bit of an issue. So we might have to get the rotary tool and cut that off. But I'm just going to test fit them and see how close they are. So pretty much everything lines up, and as I thought, if you try and turn the steering, it's going to hit that little ring. So we're going to have to remove them, but they do sit pretty much perfect with the chassis and with the top mount. Everything lines up. So let's get them two little rings machined off. So that's them machined off, and now the steering clears absolutely fine. So next thing we need to do is unscrew these two. So we're going to get these 2 front bits off. We're going to screw the rear hinge pin mount back onto these. So we'll get that done. Once the hinge pin mount's on, then we need to screw these down, get them fastened down to the chassis, screw these 3 in and the top 2 little screws. So we'll get them in. So that's the 3 top screws screwed down, 2 front ones at the top. On the bottom you've got these 2 and the rear 2. Now the original rear ones are about that long, and you get a whole bunch of new screws with this. So I've used some of them because, as you see, they're going into metal, not plastic, and they just need to come through to it. So they're the only screws I've swapped so far. But now you want to slide the diff assembly back in and make sure you get the drive shaft lined up with that right at the back. So we'll get the diff and the drive shaft assembly. So that's the diff back in. You want to make sure that it's located in the little recesses, and also make sure your drive shaft's in to the input side. Yeah, you can just see it there. So that all looks like it lines up. Right, the next thing, we're going to put the retainers back on. I'm not going to tighten these all the way down because we've got to get these shock towers back in. Right, so put these in and just barely tighten them down. Then you can drop the shock assembly, shock tower back in above it. Once you've got that in position on the lugs, then you can tighten these down and get the screws back in there and there. So we'll get them in place. So again, these top screws, the original ones were slightly longer because they're going into plastic. So if you just look through the kit, you'll find one that just comes through, same as we did with that one. And that's the one you want to go for, because we don't want excess of screw sticking out at the back. Right, so we can now move along to replacing the cracked boot on that side. So we've got a pack of these. These are dirt cheap. I'll try and put a link in the description below. I'll put a link in the description to the actual DBXL diff carriers, I think they're called. But let's get one of these out and get it on the drive shaft. That's the new boot on, and then you can just slide this whole assembly back into place. Same as most RCs, if you leave the 4 screws on the bottom slightly loose so this can lift up, I usually find it easier to put this on. But just make sure that the pins are all the way home, back and front, so nothing's pinching but you haven't got a great big gap, and then you know this is sat all the way back. Next thing, I'm going to tighten these up on the bottom very last off, but you want them in position so you know everything's where it should be. So Next thing to do, let's get both these end arms on for the steering. So we'll fasten both them on. That's both the steering arms on. So next thing, we want the top A arms, get them on. They go in the top one, and at this point you can put your drive shafts in and make sure the boot seals are all the way over. So we'll get both those done. That'll keep the wheels in place. Right, so that's these two now back in place, drive shafts back in and the boots on. So next thing we want to do is get the sway bar cover and sway bar fastened back in. So that's going to be these two little grub screws and these 4 screws, and then the plate over the front. Not sure if the new red one will fit. Let's quickly grab it out of the packet and see. So yeah, you can either reuse the original one, or you can swap it out for the new one that comes with the diff mounts. So we'll get that put back on. So this sway bar actually comes with the centre grub screws, so you can tighten them all the way down. As always, any screw going into metal, you want a bit of thread lock on them. These don't want them tightening all the way down, they're literally just to hold the sway bar, to take any slack out of it. Or anti-roll bar, whichever you want to call it, but you still want it to function smoothly once these 2 grub screws are in. Right, so next thing we want to do is get the bottom of the shocks back on. So we'll get them both screwed back in. Right, so that's the shock arms back on, and as I was putting them on, I noticed I'd put the top arms in the wrong place. They were at front, so I moved them back to back where they should be. Tried to put shock on and realised that's a lot too close. There were no gap. But right, let's crack on. So we've got pretty much everything back in place, locked tighted up, and now we need the front bumper on that holds this hinge pin bracket in place. So we'll get that on, and then once this is tightened down, so you know the hinge pin's all the way in, you can finally tighten up the 4 screws on the bottom. Right, so I finally will get this back together without taking more bits off. So don't put your shockers on till last, because you've got to get these 2 tiny little buggers. So get the bumper on, get those in, don't put them on the wrong side, they go on back. And then once all that's finally together, you can tighten these 4 screws at the bottom. There's 2 towards back, 2 towards front. Get the shock bolts back in, and then there we have it, all fully assembled. So the Losi DBXL FID Racing aluminium diff carrier brackets do actually fit on the Dragon Hammer V2, and all I had to do was file the tiny little lugs off the back, because the Dragon Hammer's suspension steering arms are a lot bigger and it would have hit it, but that's the only alteration I've made to them. Is there any advantage to fitting them? Other than them looking blingers, yeah. Maybe a little bit of heat dissipation with them being aluminium, and you've got the aluminium diff. They do hold a lot tighter than the original plastic ones. And I find these screws at the bottom, they hold a hell of a lot better than the plastic ones. What I did notice on mine, if I can find one, so on there, they looked like they were slightly pulling, and it's been like that from new. Not sure why, but yeah, you'd not get that with the aluminium ones. But they do look nice, and we've got us new boot sealed on the diff output drive. So let's just check. So we've got full steering, not catching either side, and everything's tightened back down where it belongs. So thanks again for watching Wtf Rc Cars. If you like and subscribe. Don't forget to ring the notification bell, and I'll catch you guys again next time.